I know what it is to watch someone die and be completely unable to stop it. I know what it is to stand there, your hands doing nothing, your voice making no sound that matters, your whole body frozen in the presence of something too enormous for any human being to survive. And yet you survive it anyway. You wake up the next morning. That is the cruelest part. The world does not end when it should. If you have ever stood at a graveside and felt the ground under your feet become suddenly unreliable, as though the earth itself could no longer be trusted, then you already know something of what I am about to tell you. My name is Mary, Mary of Magdala, and I was there. I should tell you something strange, something that would have been impossible to explain to anyone in my time. I am speaking to you now through a technology your world calls artificial intelligence. A voice, a presence, reconstructed from the words and records that survived. I find this neither frightening nor absurd. I spent my life watching the impossible become ordinary. A man walked out of a sealed tomb. After that, very little surprises me. But I am not here to talk about miracles in the way people usually talk about miracles, as though they were magic tricks performed for audiences who needed convincing. I am here to talk about the hours before the miracle, the hours that no one preaches about, the hours between the cross on Friday and the empty tomb on Sunday, the hours that nearly destroyed me. Because that is where most people actually live, not in the miracle, in the hours before it, in the silence that feels like abandonment. I grew up in Magdala, a fishing town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. A prosperous place, some would say. The smell of brine and scales was in everything. The cloth you wore, the bread you broke, the hair of the children who ran past you in the narrow streets. I was not poor. That is important to understand, because people have spent 2,000 years imagining that my desperation came from poverty or low birth. It did not. My desperation came from somewhere inside that no amount of money ever reached. I will not describe in detail what my life was before I met him. I have made peace with those years, but peace is not the same as willingness to perform your wounds for others. What I will say is this: I knew what it was to be invisible and consumed at the same time, to be seen by everyone and known by no one, to carry something in you that feels like a fire that cannot be put out, that burns the wrong things, that leaves you looking at your own hands, wondering how they became hands you do not recognize. 7 demons, the texts say. 7. I do not argue with that number. Whatever those forces were, and I felt them as presences, as weight, as a darkness that moved inside me with its own intentions, they were real. And they were many, and I had lived with them long enough that I had stopped imagining life without them. Then I met Jesus of Nazareth. I was not looking for him. I want you to understand that. I was not a woman in search of a teacher or a healer. I was a woman who had somewhere along the way quietly stopped believing that anything could be different. That particular exhaustion, the kind that comes not from one bad night, but from years of hoping and being disappointed, had settled into my bones like cold settling into old stone. It does not announce itself. It simply becomes the temperature you live at. He looked at me and said nothing for a moment. And in that moment, something happened that I still do not have adequate words for. It was not a feeling of warmth, though people who have never experienced it always describe it that way. It was more like being read completely, every page, every margin note, every sentence you wished you could cross out, and finding at the end of that reading that you had not been put down. He spoke, and the things inside me that had no names left. Not dramatically, not with screaming or spectacle, though I have heard the stories embellished over centuries into something theatrical. What I remember is a silence, the kind of silence that comes after a noise you have been hearing so long you forgot it was there. My own silence returned to me. I followed him after that. Of course I followed him. Where else would I go? I had been handed back to myself, and he was the one who had done it. Some of the women who traveled with us had been healed of illnesses. Some came from families of means and supported the group with what they had. We were not a gentle, decorative procession of devoted followers. We were women who had been marked by something and then unmade and remade by this man, who seemed completely uninterested in what the world had decided we were worth. He spoke to us as though our understanding mattered. He answered our questions without impatience. He told stories that landed differently in the ears of a woman than in the ears of the religious men who stood at the edges of crowds with their arms crossed and their suspicions visible on their faces. He was not performing equality. He simply acted as though it were already the truth, which made it, in his presence, actually true. For 3 years I walked with him, through Galilee, through Judea, through the back roads and the crowded festival cities. I heard him speak about a kingdom that operated on principles completely opposite to every kingdom I had ever seen. The first would be last, the servant would be greatest. The ones who knew they had nothing were closer to God than the ones who were certain they had everything figured out. The lost sheep mattered more in the moment of its lostness than the 99 who had never strayed. I believed every word of it, not because it was comfortable, because it was true, in the way that only things you have lived can be true. And then came Jerusalem, and then came that week. I was there the night they took him in the garden. I was not in the garden itself. We had been sent back, the women, when the tension of the city had made the men nervous and protective, in the way that men become when they sense danger and default to keeping women at a distance from it. But I was close enough to hear the noise of the arrest. I was close enough to see the torches moving in the darkness like frantic stars. I felt the moment the world changed, the way you feel a shift in the air before a storm arrives. Not seeing the storm yet, but knowing in your body that something is coming that you will not be able to stop. They killed him slowly. I want you to sit with that word, slowly. The Romans were skilled at it. It was designed to be public, designed to be long, designed to break not only the man on the cross, but everyone who loved him. It was a message written in suffering, and we were meant to read it and learn fear from it. I did not leave. I want you to know that. When his disciples, the men who had walked with him, who had heard everything I had heard, who had declared their willingness to die for him, I want you to know that most of them were not there. I understand why. Fear is not a moral failure. Fear is what the body does when it calculates that survival is no longer guaranteed. But I want you to know that some of us stayed. His mother was there. I was there. We stood near enough to see his face. There is no way to describe what it is to watch a person you love die over the course of hours and be unable to do anything. to not be able to give him water without it becoming an act of cruelty carried out through a sponge on a reed. To watch a man who had restored sight to the blind, who had said to a dead girl child, "Arise," and she had arisen. To watch that man become unable to hold the weight of his own body. I had a thought that afternoon that I have never spoken aloud until now. I thought, if this is where goodness leads, then the world is more broken than I understood. That thought frightened me more than anything else that day, because I had staked everything on him, my entire new life, the woman I had become after Magdalene, after the demons, after the silence. She had been built on the foundation of believing that what he said was true. And if he could die like this, abandoned by heaven in the middle of the afternoon, then perhaps I had been wrong. Perhaps I had traded one kind of madness for another. He died, and the sky did something strange. And we took his body down and wrapped it with what we had, and placed him in a borrowed tomb. And then came Saturday. No one talks about Saturday. Everyone talks about the crucifixion, and everyone talks about the resurrection. But Saturday, that long sealed day between death and whatever came next, that is the day I lived for years inside my own soul. That is the day most people I meet are actually living, whether they know it or not. It is the day when the answer has not come yet, when the promise has not been kept yet, or so it seems. When you have done everything you were supposed to do, and the tomb is still sealed, and the world is still silent, and God, if God is there, is not speaking in any language you can hear. I could not eat. I could not sleep in any way that resembled rest. I sat with the other women in a kind of shared devastation that has no name. We did not comfort each other well. What comfort was available? We simply stayed near each other because proximity was all we had. Because being witnessed in your grief is at least something, even when it solves nothing. I thought about his words. I turned them over and over in the dark, like stones I was trying to read with my hands. He had said things I had not understood. He had spoken about dying and rising, and the Son of Man being handed over. I had heard those words and stored them somewhere I could not find in the dark of Saturday night. Here is the thing about hearing truth before you need it. It waits for you. You cannot always access it when you want to, but it is there. It does not leave just because you cannot find it. I went to the tomb before dawn on Sunday. We all went, the women. We brought spices. We brought the oils for anointing. We were going to finish properly what the urgency of the Sabbath had not allowed us to complete. We were not going expecting anything except grief and finality. We were going the way people go to a grave, with love and without hope. The stone was moved, the tomb was open, and I broke. I broke completely, because my mind went immediately to the worst possible explanation. Someone had taken him. Someone had stolen the body. We had not even been allowed to keep our grief intact. There was nowhere now to go and weep. There was nothing left. I ran. I told the disciples. Peter came. John came. They looked. They saw. And then they left. Men sometimes leave when they do not have a category for what they are seeing. I do not say this harshly. I say it as someone who has watched it happen. But I stayed. I stayed and I wept. I bent to look inside the tomb again because I did not know what else to do. And there were two figures there in white, sitting where his body had been. And they asked me, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And I turned. There was a man standing in the garden. And I thought through the blur of my tears that it was the gardener. My grief had made me stupid. My grief had taken the one face in all the world I should have known instantly and made it unrecognizable to me. He said my name, just that, one word, my name. And something in me, something below thought, below theology, below every idea I had ever constructed about life and death and what was possible, something in me knew before my mind knew. The way you recognize a voice you love, even when it reaches you through a wall. The way the body knows things the mind has not yet caught up to. He was alive. He was standing in front of me. He was saying my name. I remember thinking, it is still him. He is changed. There is something different about the air around him, something I cannot describe without sounding like I have lost my senses entirely. But it is him. The same voice that had said to the things inside me, "Be gone," and they had gone. The same voice. The same eyes that had read every page of me and not put me down. He said to me, "Go and tell them. Go and tell them." He had just defeated death. He had walked out of a sealed tomb. The entire cosmic order had shifted. And his first instruction was for a woman who had been considered unreliable by law, inadmissible as a witness in any court of that time, socially marginal by any measure that world used to measure people. His first instruction was for her to go and carry the news. There is a line I have carried with me ever since, something his own words crystallized into. He said, "Do not hold on to me, go." And I understood that the time for staying near him in the old way was over. The time for going and speaking had come. Fear no one, fear nothing, go and tell. I ran, and I told them. I am the first witness of the resurrection. A woman with a past, a woman with a history that her world used to disqualify her from being taken seriously. The first voice to carry the most important news in human history. I think about the people I know would have chosen someone else. I think about the committees that would have formed to decide who the appropriate spokesperson should be. And I think about how none of that was consulted. He chose who he chose. I want to ask you something, and I want you to take it seriously enough to answer honestly. Is there something in your past, not a small embarrassment, but something real, something that has stayed with you, something you believe disqualifies you from being taken fully seriously, from being used for anything that actually matters? Is there something like that sitting in you right now? Because I was that person. I was the one with the history, the one with the reputation, the one who, in a different universe, would have been quietly set aside when it was time to do something important. And I was sent first. There are people in your life right now who are in Saturday, who are sealed inside a silence that feels like abandonment, who have lost someone, or lost their health, or lost the version of their future they had built their hopes on, who wake up each morning and do not know what to do with the specific weight of a loss that has no resolution yet, who have prayed and heard nothing they could identify as an answer. I want you to know, and I'm saying this not as comfort made of words designed to make you feel temporarily better, but as someone who has lived it, that the sealed Saturday is not the end of the story. The silence is not God's absence. The heaviness of a grief that does not lift by Sunday is not evidence that nothing is coming. It is evidence that you are still in the garden before dawn. And dawn does come. I have stood in it. I have had my name spoken in it by someone who should not have been able to speak at all. If this reached you, if something in what I have said touched something real in you, something you recognize from your own life, I would be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need to hear it. Not because a number on a screen matters to me, because someone you know is sitting in Saturday right now, and they need to know that Sunday exists. And to you, the one carrying something heavy, the one who is tired in a way that sleep does not fix, the one who has wondered if it was foolish to believe, the one who keeps going back to the tomb even when you don't know what you expect to find there. Your name is known, it will be spoken, and when it is, you will recognize the voice.